reducing the divide, an invisible society no more.
Okay, so a home is fundamental infrastructure for a decent life. It is as basic as a human need as food and water. A civilized society would not accept people managed without these nutritional basics, so why does it seem to put up with such stark inequality or shortage of accommodation in the UK, and especially here in Oxford? So if a minority of people were hoarding food and trickling it out at extortionate prices, with food banks being the norm for most people, there would surely be civil unrest. Of course, the demand for food can be met from anywhere in the world now, but the creation of new housing suffers uniquely due to its reliance on finite and static commodity, land near employment. Affordability is the other crucial factor at play, and is a factor not solely related to the lack of supply. Renting or purchasing accommodation in Oxford is so expensive relative to earnings that it hurts so many people, causing them out of the city or away, and at worst, homelessness. So some questions that we need to think about are: have we got the right-sized homes for our households? Does their tenure and regulation provide very necessary stability? And are existing homes in an enduringly fit state, affordable to run, and easy to get into and around? So I want to introduce the invisible society that is the homeless. So in 21st century Britain, everybody should have a place to live. That statement would sound better if it read, in 21st century Britain, everyone has a place to live. Homelessness is devastating, dangerous, and isolating. And on average, homeless people die at just 47 years old. People sleeping on the street are almost 17 times more likely to have been victims of violence, and homeless people are over 9 times more likely to take their own life than the general population. So for many people, ignoring the homeless is easier to do than acknowledging them, and this is possibly the most degrading action someone could do to another person. Mark Horwath, founder of video blog Invisible People, summarised it best, saying, "It's not that people are bad, but if we make eye contact or engage in conversation, then we have to admit they exist and that we might have a basic human need to care. But it's so much easier to simply close our eyes and shield our hearts to their existence." So we are essentially stripping the homeless of their importance, identity, and humanity, and the worst part of it seems to be accepted as normal. Therefore, for the purposes of this talk, are we referring to the homeless with the term the invisible society. So, the problem. So, in Oxford, there is housing failure and a homelessness crisis. The city is the most unaffordable in Britain, with rents and house prices relative to earnings higher than London. As a city, it desperately needs more initiatives that foster change. And having been a student now for a 5th year in Oxford, I cannot comprehend how rents are increasing, and also the presence of rough sleepers are increasing. And what we categorise as the homeless has increased majorly since I arrived in the city. Since 2012, rough sleepers have increased by 175%, and the average house price of 491,000 is around 16 times the average yearly household income of 29,400. The facts are staggering, and it's something that needs to be addressed. So, this is my model concept about the divide. So our cities are divided, and extreme economic inequality is corrosive to our societies. It makes poverty reduction harder, hurts our economies, and drives conflict and violence. Reversing this trend presents a significant challenge, but one where we've seen some progress. So this model really tried me to think about how society functions, and to put it simply, dividing it into classes. So at the top is the yellow, which is what you can say as the rich. In the middle we have where I'd like to think we are, and at the bottom are the homeless people. But we are all connected by this in society, and what I wanted to demonstrate is, we're all striving for this sort of end goal, but without having some change and impact, it's not going to happen. So there needs to be a way of reducing this divide, especially when it comes to those who are housed and those who are not, and how we can be rid of an invisible society that many seem to just accept. So this is the obsessive journey. which was mapping from my house to the open house scheme, which has just recently opened in central Oxford. And just with this simple sort of stretch of walk, which lasts around half an hour, it's staggering how many homeless people I saw along the way, and just shows the locations which they are positioned. So, coming to open house. So what's happening now in Oxford? There are many organisations such as Crisis Skylight, Oxford Homes Project, Homes for All, which are all trying to help the invisible society. And Open House is a new public living room which has recently opened by Makerspace, Transition by Design and Aspire. And it is set up as a public living room to promote collaboration, debate and reflection about the issue at hand, welcoming a diverse range of perspectives on how we can tackle the housing and homeless challenges facing our city. So this leads me into my project. So it is situated where Open House is situated on Little Clarendon Street in Jericho. And I am going to use Open House as a hub, this will then expand outwards, and I will look at using the idea of infilling to help create these sort of micro homes to try and aid like a temporary solution for the time being. So I was looking at the site which it's situated, and there are these 3 very blank, underused facades, and I feel that using the infilling technique, it would be beneficial to make some sort of pod transitional starter flat, which I would call open housing. But this won't be able to function without having an existing living room space like Open House is situated, so it's going to work hand in hand with that. So the idea is to create these pods which are going to be on a micro scale, and it's promoting that micro is desirable, and also connecting the homeless to other user groups, because it's not just targeting at them, but those who find affordability an issue, so young professionals or anyone who wants to go smaller, but it will focus on that element. So how the pods are structured: they're less than 15 square meters, and they are divided into 2 parts, which is the front, your eating and cooking and washing space, and then your living and working space at the rear. And it's as minimalist as possible, but we'll have everything integrated and will be formed by 3D sort of printing and CNC structures, so they can be prefabbed before they're put into site. So this is a section through 2 pods, and I'm use this L intersection to try and make the most out of the space. And it's basically showing how the beds will slot on top of each other and the living space is separate. And again, this is just showing how that functions. So finally, what is next? So this year I have looked at the symptom of being homelessness, or the invisible society, and next semester I want to look at the cause. So I want to answer these questions: how can we truly solve this problem, and how can we give these people the skills and resources that will reduce the divide and put an end to the invisible society?